So yes, hello everybody. I'm Andrea. I work as part of Genova Diagnostics clinical education team and have done for the last 10 years. So I kind of know these tests quite well. The main test that everyone's sort of been discussing this morning is our GI effects comprehensive profile, which is our most, as it says, comprehensive stool profile. So it looks at all of the areas within the GI tract, so digestion, absorption, inflammation, the gut microbiome, parasites, bacteria, yeast. And so as an initial test, that would always be the suggested test to go for initially, because with the gut, what you're wanting to do is get the biggest picture possible and get the most information you can, and then drill down from there. So as an initial test, the GI effects comprehensive would always be sort of the suggestive test. Now we understand that finances come into consideration, but also sometimes when you do that initial test, it's not always necessary to go and do a full GI effects again as a follow-up test. So we offer a couple of other smaller profiles which you can utilize, as a follow-up. Or not. Sam, what have you done to me? So the first one, I think it was maybe mentioned this morning by Tracy, is the GI effects. Oh no, it wasn't this one. It was the GI effects Microbial Ecology, which is a bit of a tongue twister. We generally refer to it as the 2205. And the front page looks similar to that. Does this have a pointer? Similar to that of the full comprehensive profile. So you get those pillars, you're getting that commensal balance chart and that relative abundance chart. So the summaries of those 24 commensal anaerobic bacteria that we're measuring. There is one, oh yes, I do have a highlight. There is a box here that says inflammation. And it says biomarker analysis not performed. That is not, that's basically, it says what it says on the tin. It's not been performed. That pillar is just there. I'm not sure why it wasn't taken out. I think just for visual, it hasn't been taken out, but inflammation is not included on this test. What is included is the 24 commensal bacteria. So that page 3 with all those 24 commensal bacteria, the culture for bacteria and yeast. So additionally looking at what's going on in the gut. And then ONP, microscopic examination for parasites, as well as the PCR for parasites. So as I mentioned, you get these 24 commensal bacteria, so you can get an indication of those commensals, that gut microbiome, what that is looking like. And this is the same that is on the GI effects comprehensive. So nothing is different, that's exactly the same. And then again, you get the microbiology, so you get the culture, so you can see additionally what's going on with the bacteria and with the yeast. And again, it's exactly the same as is run on the full comprehensive profile. You get the sensitivities, so as Karen was talking about, whenever we culture for a potentially pathogenic bacteria or yeast, it's a live culture. We isolate that bacteria or yeast, and then we run the natural and prescriptive agents to see what helps to eradicate or reduce it. The prescriptive agents are obviously antibiotics, and then the natural agents get into the sort of plant-based, herb-based products. As Karen mentioned, oops, sorry, we're scrolling ahead. Sorry, everybody. As Karen mentioned, so as I say, we isolate that bacteria or yeast, and then we run these natural prescriptive agents, and the longer the gray bar, the general, the higher inhibition, the better it is at clearing it out. We don't get into specific products. So obviously different products will have different strengths, but this is a guide to know kind of which direction to go with which plant-based products. And then you get the ova and microscopic ova and parasites, so looking for that ova and parasites. And again, this is the same as you would find on the comprehensive profile. You also get into sort of some inflammation markers down here as well. And again, it's the PCR for parasites, exactly the same as you would find on the comprehensive profile. So what you're missing in this test is kind of that digestion, absorption, short chain fatty acids. So if you run a GI effects and all of those markers have come out relatively okay, then you can just look at running this profile. And again, sometimes financially, it's not always viable to do that full profile. So this is another option to go in with patients to get a really good insight into what's going on with their gut microbiome at least. There's a new smaller profile come out that we've just introduced recently, which is the gut pathogen profile. For those of you who have been using our test for a while, it slightly replaced the comprehensive parasitology test. It's sort of the updated version of that. Again, it has the same sort of summary front page, so those pillars, and it would highlight the areas that needed working on. So the difference between this one and the 2205 or the GI Microbial Ecology is that it doesn't include those 24 commensal bacteria. So there's no PCR for commensals on this. It is purely looking at the culture for bacteria and yeast. It's looking at the parasitology, so that microscopic examination, as well as the PCR. You get the sensitivities, as always. It includes a KOH Prep, which I will come on to talk about, which is for looking for yeasts. And then it also includes macroscopic examination for worms. So this test is purely kind of looking at what additionally is going on in the gut, what might be driving dysbiosis, and what additionally might be going on in that gut that might be disrupting that gut microbiome. So the microbiology, again, it's exactly the same. It's that culture and the sensitivities if we find or culture out any potentially pathogenic bacteria. And then additionally, this is this KOH Prep, which is a potassium hydroxide prep. So it's like a stain that is put on the stool sample, and it highlights yeast cells. So it's kind of another backup test or an additional test looking for yeast. It is included in this test, and if you're suspecting yeast, it's worthwhile adding this on. So it can be added on to the GI effects comprehensive profile. I think it's fairly cheap. I think it's about £30 to add on there, KOH Prep. And it can be added on to the 2205. So again, if yeast is a real concern or a real issue, again, this is another additional test to sort of look for those yeasts. And we sort of capture it in a more budding state and a more aggressive state than we might not always capture in a culture. In this test, it also includes macroscopic examination for worms. So this is eggs for worms. The ova for worms are included in the microscopic ova and parasites, but actual physical worms, looking for pinworms, roundworms, things like that, are included in this. And then you also get, as I say, the ova microscopic examination for ova and parasites, and the PCR for parasite testing as well. I forgot to mention that the worms can also, macroscopic examination can also, worms for worms can also be added on to any of our stool tests, so the 2200 and the 2205, and again, it's a relatively cheap add-on of about £20. There's add-ons that can be added on to all three of the tests, so the 2200, the 2205, and the 2207, and that is H. pylori can be added on, Campylobacter, Clostridium difficile, the Shiga toxin form of E. coli, and then fecal lactoferrin, which is another sort of gut inflammation marker. So these can be added on to any of the tests. It is an additional cost to add on those, and they are listed on our price list to add them on. Generally, H. pylori you're adding on with generally upper GI tract symptoms, and then with Campylobacter and these pathogenic bacteria, they're pretty. You have pretty acute onset symptoms with Campylobacter, with Shiga toxin, E. coli, and with Clostridium difficile. They're pretty specific acute diarrhea symptoms. And so these aren't, some patients, I think they are added on, they are listed on the requisition form, and they can just be ticked off and added on. I'm just making it aware, because patients, I think, sometimes just tick and add these on wherever. It is an additional cost. So some patients just go ahead and tick these things on and don't realize that there's an additional cost to them. I'm just making you aware that there is an additional cost of them. And generally, there is specific symptoms with them. They're not just, you know, your average IBS patient. They are generally quite severe cases. Which profile to choose is very much obviously down to you and your patient. We offer a service which most of you may or may not know of, but it's called a witch test. It's a 15-minute call with one of our clinicians. There's 3 of us. We can go through the varying testing options, not just with stool testing, but with any testing choices with your patients. You provide us the symptoms and we go through what testing options might be viable. And again, obviously price comes into a consideration. You know, we have kind of good varying levels of testing within all of our testing areas, and so we can generally work out, you know, the most cost-effective way to do testing. And logistics, sample collection, as you know, Karen Ward said, that you know, some patients just don't want to do stool testing, and so there's other ways you can look at the gut, and so we can discuss that with you as well. That's my whirlwind stop tour. I hope that gives you a better understanding of the other tests that are offered. There are the CDSA products, which I haven't really discussed. They are comprehensive stool tests as well, and they are, again, sort of cheaper options than the full GI effects. The biggest question we get around that is, what's the difference? And the difference between sort of the CDSA products, which is our original stool testing, and the new GI effects products is that PCR, is that looking at that gut microbiome, looking at those commensal bacteria and the parasites through that DNA probe. And that's the biggest difference. But again, by calling in, we can discuss with you other options, you know, those CDSA options that may be slightly cheaper, but still enabling you to get a comprehensive picture of your patient's gut health.
Thank you, Andrew. I think we have some time for some questions, but I just want to reiterate one point you did say, and that is, please do use and abuse the MedEd team. Even if you're an experienced practitioner, it's always good to have a second opinion. If you talk to your account manager, myself, Sam, Greg, wherever he is, get in touch with us. We'll book you in for a time that works with them. Hello, Gregory. And we'll book you in with a time that works best for you all, but I really would do it if you haven't done it before. They are a wealth of knowledge. Any questions? I'll take that as a no. So we, oh, there we go.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, but I think this is just like a suggestion. I would like to suggest actually putting the H. pylori as part of as part of the GI, at least GI effect, because I think if you do a test, a stool test, testing, you see, particularly for upper gut, you see, I think without H. pylori, this test is going to be really not very helpful at all. And it's just like a suggestion. I think it would be great, actually, if it can be included in GI effect rather than the other 2 tests. That's one issue. The other issue is sometimes we have got a patient with permeability, and as you said, the cost now is going to be a problem if you are going to request all the tests. So, for example, you get the zonulin test can be added to the GI effect, and that, if it is positive, that is probably it's a sign of permeability, of gut permeability. I mean, do you have to do the other tests as well? I mean, just like say the SIBO test as well, if the zonulin test is already positive, because I think there is one issue. If there is permeability, one issue, and what is the cause of permeability is another issue as well.
So I'm just going to have a little discussion about, I haven't mentioned zonulin, and the reason why I haven't mentioned it is because there was a research paper that came out late 2018, I think, that we sort of reference on our GIFX test, and is referenced on our website as well, that suggested the kit manufacturer who makes all the kits measuring zonulin wasn't actually measuring zonulin. And so we called this is a research, it's a published paper. We called Immunodiagnostic, who is the company that makes the kit for measuring zonulin, and they confirmed that it actually isn't zonulin that they're measuring. It's at best a family peptide related marker of zonulin. And so any lab measuring zonulin isn't actually measuring zonulin, and so they don't actually know what this zonulin family peptide related marker represents. They don't really know what, it's not, they couldn't confirm that it is associated with gut permeability being high or low. So we generally, I think it is still being offered, but we don't generally suggest adding it on because we don't know. Some practitioners continuing to do so. We're trying to build some research around it to establish what it means being high or low, but certainly for the meantime, we're sort of putting it on back burner and don't really suggest adding it on. It is a bit frustrating, and I feel you're frustrating, that we don't really have anything that is for gut permeability, and we thought we had that answer in zonulin. We were very delighted to have that marker. Unfortunately, it is what it is. The reason why we don't offer a gut permeability test is that it's a challenge test, it's a solution, and part of our laboratory regulations don't enable us to send out solutions, prescribed solutions with our testing. So that's currently why we don't offer a gut permeability test. There are, as you've seen this morning, there are markers within the GIFX, those inflammation markers, that fecal secretory IgA, that can give you a fairly good indication. And certainly if there's dysbiosis going on, if you've got a parasite going on in your gut, you can make some pretty good assumptions that there is probably a degree of gut permeability going on. So unfortunately, yes, we don't have a definitive test to say there is gut permeability or not. But I think if you start to build a picture with a comprehensive stool test, you can get that indication, you can get that information from that. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And as for H. pylori, I hear you.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, thank you. But I think also in celiac, doing celiac in patients who have been gluten-free for some time, celiac serology, that's a useless test as well. But I think in these patients, possibly genetic celiac might help here.
Which the HDQA8 and that again we don't offer if you run the celiac, so we run a gluten sensitivity and celiac profile, which is a serum profile. There is an algorithm that sort of goes down to those genetic SNPs. We don't currently run those genetic SNPs. I think that if it goes down that pathway and there's a suspicion of or indicating that there might be a celiac patient, I think still the gold standard for establishing celiac is a biopsy test.
Yes, but you don't advise serology in patients who are on gluten-free diet.
Say that again.
You don't advise serology?
No, because we're measuring IgG, and the half-life of an IgG is 21 days. So if someone has been avoiding gluten for months or goodness knows how long, they need to reintroduce that gluten for those antibodies to build up again for us to be able to measure them. Oh. And that can be a really distressing and painful experience for patients. So if someone is reacting to gluten and they kind of, again, Tracy Randall with her patient who experimented with the Weetabix, that was a good enough indication in my mind. An elimination is still sort of the gold standard for food sensitivities. And so if someone has reintroduced that gluten back in and they are getting reactions, I'm not sure you need a test to confirm that they are gluten sensitivity. I think you may want to do further investigations about whether they're celiac, certainly, but for as far as gluten sensitivity. If someone's reintroducing gluten and they are reacting, I'm not sure you need a test to confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, fine. So Andrea will also be with us all day. She'll also be on our Q&A panel. So again, if you think of anything else between now and I believe 3:15 when we kick that off, please write it down. Thank you very much.